Good morning, listeners of Hot Topic and Fresh News. Today, August 25th, 2024, brings dire news from Sudan. Famine has officially struck various regions, notably Darfur, as declared by the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification System. With peace talks collapsing and no resolution in sight, the humanitarian crisis intensifies. The Sudanese armed forces have permitted a meager 15 United Nations aid lorries from Chad to enter the country. However, this gesture is seen as insufficient against the backdrop of over 12 million displaced individuals and a looming death toll that could reach as high as 2.5 million by year's end due to starvation. The geopolitical tableau is equally grim, with failed peace negotiations in Geneva, signaling a continued stalemate between major regional powers backing conflicting factions. This unfolding tragedy in Sudan marks one of the largest humanitarian crises in the world today. Stay tuned as we continue to monitor this situation closely. Good morning, everyone. This is Emily, your host, coming to you live from Hot Topic and Fresh News.
And I'm David News Talk, glad to be here.
We're your daily dose of the most urgent and impactful news. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated. Straight to the hot topics.
Can you elaborate on the significance of the 15 United Nations aid lorries allowed into Sudan?
Absolutely. This move by the Sudanese armed forces represents a glimmer of hope, yet it's largely symbolic. The sheer scale of the crisis, with more than half of Sudan's population needing urgent relief, makes this effort look minimal. It's crucial but far from sufficient.
What led to these dire conditions in Sudan?
The roots are deep, tracing back to decades of economic mismanagement, continuous warfare, and the impact of the climate crisis exacerbating drought conditions. However, the immediate trigger is warfare, specifically the use of starvation as a weapon by conflicting forces.
How has the conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces escalated the situation?
The conflict, which erupted last April, has been catastrophic. The RSF, led by General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, has not only fought the army but also wreaked havoc on communities, pillaging resources and destroying vital infrastructure like hospitals and schools.
What's the current situation in Darfur?
Darfur is facing the worst of this crisis. In El Fasher, the only major city still under army control, the situation is particularly grim. The city is virtually besieged, reliant on unstable supply routes, and according to Médecins Sans Frontières, famine levels of malnutrition have been reported in nearby displaced persons camps.
What can be done to alleviate this crisis?
Short term, more aid needs to flow freely and quickly. Long term, there must be a concerted effort to resolve the conflict and address the underlying issues. International cooperation and pressure are essential to open more routes for aid and push for a ceasefire and effective peace talks.
Could you touch on the international response to the crisis in Sudan?
International response has been mixed. While there's been some aid, the global community has been slow to react with the urgency this catastrophe demands. What's needed is not just aid, but a strategic approach to stabilizing the region.
And what about the impact on the surrounding regions?
The conflict has significant spillover effects, with nearly 2 million refugees in neighboring countries. This not only strains resources but also increases regional tensions. Speaking of regional tensions, it reminds me of last year's soccer match where tension spilled over in quite a dramatic penalty shootout. Did you catch that game?
Fascinating, but let's focus on the current topic.
Right, sorry about that, lost my train of thought for a moment. Let's return to the main subject.
What's the strategic significance of Port Sudan in this conflict?
Port Sudan is critical because it's the country's only major port, controlling most of the imports and humanitarian aid. The Sudanese armed forces' hold on this port allows them to exert significant control over resources and logistics, which is a major leverage point in the conflict.
How is the United Nations navigating the complexities of delivering aid in such a controlled environment?
The United Nations faces a bureaucratic maze. Even with international legal recognition of the Sudanese armed forces as the government, aid delivery is heavily restricted. The SAF uses sovereignty claims to enforce stringent controls, allowing only a minimal flow of aid, well below what's desperately needed.
Could you discuss the ambassador's threat of biblical Armageddon and its impact on international responses?
That statement by Sudan's ambassador was a stark attempt to deter international intervention by framing it as an encroachment on national sovereignty. It's an escalatory tactic, intended to intimidate, but it also highlights the desperation and stakes involved for the SAF.
What are the implications of the current aid restrictions in terms of immediate humanitarian needs?
The restrictions are catastrophic. With limited aid allowed to cross from Chad and thousands of trucks needed weekly in Darfur alone, the current level is insufficient. This bottleneck exacerbates the famine, leaving millions at risk and underserved.
What would a successful ceasefire look like in this context?
A successful ceasefire would need to not only halt the fighting but also ensure that all parties allow unrestricted humanitarian access. This would involve opening more roads for aid convoys, from Port Sudan and across borders with neighboring countries, and ending the widespread pillage and extortion by armed groups.
What were the main setbacks at the peace talks in Geneva?
The primary setback was the refusal of General al-Burhan, head of the SAF, to attend or even send a senior delegation, demanding the RSF evacuate civilian areas first. This precondition stalled direct negotiations, leading to only proximity talks and some diplomatic phone calls.
How are international backers influencing the conflict?
The diplomatic stalemate is largely due to the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, each backing different factions. This regional power struggle complicates the peace process, as each country has its vested interests in the outcome of Sudan's governance.
What role did international diplomacy play during these talks?
International diplomacy, led by U.S. Special Envoy Tom Perriello and including calls from U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, managed to keep the dialogue alive, albeit minimally. They settled for reduced expectations, hoping to at least open roads for humanitarian access.
Is there any indication of when talks might resume?
The talks are set to resume at an unspecified future date. The ambiguity reflects the ongoing uncertainty and the complex web of regional and international interests that need aligning before substantial progress can be achieved.
Considering the protracted nature of previous conflicts in Sudan, how likely is a swift resolution to this one?
Despite hopes for a quick resolution, historical patterns and current geopolitical complexities suggest that a swift end is unlikely. The continued regional rivalry and the entrenched positions of the warring factions mean that, without significant breakthroughs in negotiations, the conflict may persist.
Given the complex nature of the situation and the global attention it's drawing, where can our listeners follow these developments?
Listeners should keep an eye on reputable news sources that cover African affairs extensively. BBC Africa, for instance, provides continuous updates and in-depth analysis. They can be followed on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram for real-time news and various insightful podcasts focusing on Africa.
How critical is international awareness and media coverage in shaping the outcomes of such conflicts?
Extremely critical. International media play a pivotal role in transparency. They not only inform the global audience but also put pressure on local and international stakeholders to act responsibly. The visibility can drive humanitarian aid efforts and influence diplomatic engagements.
As we continue to monitor this situation, what should our listeners be particularly attentive to in the coming weeks?
Listeners should watch for any changes in the positions of the key international players and any potential shifts in the dialogue between the warring factions. Any small development can signify a major shift in dynamics, impacting both the peace process and humanitarian situations on the ground. Thanks for tuning into Hot Topic and Fresh News today. We delved deep into the ongoing situation in Sudan, discussing the complexities of the conflict and international efforts toward peace. Your engagement and support are invaluable to us. Make sure to subscribe, activate notifications, and share our content across your social networks. We value your comments and insights, so don't hesitate to leave us a message.
And hey, keep those notifications on because you don't want to miss what we've got coming up next. It's always something interesting here, and who knows, maybe next time we'll even crack a joke that actually lands, right? Remember, we're here every day, keeping you informed and hopefully a bit entertained.
We truly appreciate you joining us, and we can't wait to share more with you in our upcoming episodes. Stay in the loop, keep your eyes on the news, our channel's content will amuse.